SportsEpreneur.
Hello, Athlete Mindset community. This is Lisa Bontasumi, the host of Athlete Mindset. Before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to support the mission and purpose of our show. For $10 a month, you can help to make sure these conversations get to as many athletes, teams, coaches, and sport mental health environments as possible. As a subscriber, you will receive exclusive content and updates on current topics in athlete mental health, and you'll be directly contributing to the betterment of mental health for all athletes. Join the cause. Subscribe at sportse.io/athlete and make a difference today. Again, that's sportse.io/athlete. With your support and amplification, we can ensure more voices are heard and more individuals and communities are positively impacted. Hey, Athlete Mindset community, what's up? Super excited. So this is a two-part series installment. I interviewed Dr. Kweku Amoasi back in October of 2024. And I guess I can't go another year without talking to him. So here we are, another interview with him. Let me give him his proper flowers and introduction before we start to dive in. Dr. Kweku Amoasi is a licensed psychologist and certified mental performance consultant. He is a published author, keynote speaker, and radio host. He currently serves as a psychological service provider for the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee and is the chief wellness officer for Blacksmith Consulting. In addition, he has served as a psychologist in hospitals, prisons, and secondary and post-secondary school milieus. And over the past 11 years, he has worked with Cyber Athletics and Nike Elite Youth Basketball, Full Circle Confidential, and teams in the NFL, NBA, and NCAA. How's it going, my brother?
You know, this is our achievement week with the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, so I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling good.
Achievement week, yes, bros.
Years in our fraternity. So I got my colors on for those who can't see.
Yeah.
But no, I feel good. It's like, and this is the thing, when you're in good community and you're doing positive things, it just strengthens you in so many different ways. We talk about people doing things to self-medicate. This is one of those self-medications that's good, being around love or generosity and then being able to give, to be able to help others. I just feel really strong, feel really good. And then I'm in good company with you, so it makes me smile even more.
Yeah, same. We've had to hit a couple points of adversity leading up to this point, but we are here. And just because we, recorded our last episode a year ago, that don't mean that we don't be texting and calling and commenting and all this stuff. We have to stay connected. That's a priority for me as a human, as a awesome person in this field, and as a bruh like Delta Sigma Theta, Omega Psi Phi, let's go. And so let us bring all the energies from all our communities into this talk. I know we will. So let's start it off. You ready?
Oh.
So suicide prevention and mental health crises among athletes continue to be a critical concern, as you and I have talked about, and we know. We have recently heard in the news of Marshawn Kneeland dying by suicide. The concern is not just with pro athletes or NFL players, but from your perspective, what are some of the underlying factors that make athletes particularly vulnerable, and how can sports psychologists and those of us in the profession support systems better respond?
I think it's a lot of ways you can answer this, but if we go back to kind of wishful things, what we need to start doing now, we have to start to talk to our youth. We got to talk to the coaches. We got to talk to the youth, the parents, and make this something that's what we remove the stigma to be able to talk about. We bring in the psychology part from the performance so they understand, hey, how can I optimize my performance? But then also the psychology from the clinical side, like, hey, if I'm not doing good outside of the field, how do I address these feelings? And to get to your original questions, most of them can't answer because they never had somebody tell them that. So when thought of as a superhero. You know, you're superhuman when you're an athlete. You can do things that no more mortal can do. You're jumping higher, you're running faster, you're doing all of the things that make people marvel. And so you said, why would I want to attach anything that can bring down that era of invincibility, that era of strength? So the first thing is we build them up so they can't even be human. They can't be real with their emotions. They can't talk. They can't say these things. So many suffer in silence. And then when you put in there, and this is with both male and females, it's such a masculine, negative type of energy of this. I got it. I don't need any help. I'm rough. I'm rugged. I got this. I'm a dog. I'm this. I'm that. And what happens is that creates a culture where I can't talk to people about I'm hurting because I'm a superhero. How can I be hurt? So first we have this superhero kind of trait. But then the second thing is when somebody says it, guess what? Now our society has gotten a little better where we'll applaud the people. Oh, I'm so glad such and such said this. I'm so glad such and such said this in front of everybody. But behind closed doors, what's the one axiom that every coach says? The best ability is availability. I don't care if you're not available because of a hamstring or ankle, or if it's because of your brain, whatever it might be that can cause you not to be irregular with consistency. Now it puts something on you. I have to select positions. This person suffers from mental illness. This person doesn't. That's the edge I need. So why am I going to say anything that can potentially jeopardize how I'm looked at by my coaches or by my teammates? My teammates, I want them to see me as strong. I want them to see me as this person who has it all. You come to me for the answers. And this is the irony of it, Lisa. When we talk about people, and I'm not just putting meds out there like that, but we understand what psychotropics can do in certain situations. I said medication, specifically psychotropic medications that's prescribed by a psychiatrist, it can be abused. And that's why most people, especially in marginalized communities, are afraid of it because they've seen us abused by it, misused by it. But when done properly, it can be extremely beneficial. But when you tell a person about taking medication, it's ain't taking no meds, ain't nothing wrong with me.
Right.
But this is the same person who will get up, smoke 4 blunts, will go get 2 packs of gummies, will go get this, go drink this alcohol, go get this, will self-medicate. And now when you're self-medicating, what is that? Even though people understand that to be a problem, it doesn't bring the same stigma as taking a psychotropic. So I'd rather be known as the weed head. I'd rather be known as the crackhead. I'd rather be known as the alcoholic than a person who takes medication because of the stigma that comes. So when we start talking about, I can't even use some of the things that come attached that might be able to help me because it's there. And then the main thing, and this is the hardest one, we don't want to admit it to ourselves. In our profession, think about how many of us, we don't do true self-care. I got this. I can get this. I'm strong enough. I can handle this. And that's what makes you so successful because you've been built and you've been trained to say, you know what? I can overcome what most people can't overcome. I can tackle the things that most people can't tackle. I have confidence. I'm going to will myself out of this. I'm going to make sure that this is not the end of me like that. And then it becomes overwhelming. But just like the weight room and we need a spotter, sometimes we got to recognize in life we need a mental spotter. We need an emotional spotter. Some weights are too heavy to lift. And if we understand that going into the gym, we have to make sure that's known in our personal lives. But so many people go to life, unlike the gym, without a spotter, and you have negative consequences. And I say this from a true life story. I had a friend. He wanted to get strong. He was getting stronger and stronger. And he got to the point where he started to lift really heavy weights. Well, the weight got too heavy for him. He didn't have a spotter, fell, tore his neck up, and he died, broke his neck.
Oh my gosh.
Of what he was doing. So when you can think of it like that with weights, I tell people to have that same look emotionally. The problem is weights are visible. We can see it, we can feel it. But when we start to deal with emotional and mental issues, those things are invisible and we can't feel it the same. We don't see it the same. So we don't respect it the same, but it can have the same deadly consequences.
Your sort of connection to mental and physical helps people understand it. That's really, really important. And the sort of the stigma, the weakness that goes along with male and female. It's so well said and very, very much appreciated. What is one thing a parent and a coach can each do in their role for these youth athletes early on to help break the stigma, to help normalize it? It's okay to talk about mental weakness and that there's a way to be mentally strong. Like just because you might have a diagnosis or a condition doesn't mean you're weak. You can be strong within the diagnosis too.
I think it's what you just said. You talk about it. It's not taboo. It's not something that's swept under the rug. One of the things I love, well, what we do at the USOPC is everybody who comes into work at the USOPC or is affiliated with an athlete or the athletes themselves have an ability to get trained in mental health first aid. And why I love mental health first aid is because it gives us an idea on how we can become what I tell people what CPR is to the medical profession. Doesn't make you a doctor to know CPR, but it helps you to be what a first responder. I can help until what the real helps get here. Mental health first aid is that same type of strategy. What it does, it lets us know what are some of the things we should be looking out for. What are the things we can say to let everybody know that this is normal, that this is a way of life. But what do we do to reduce the stigma? And not only do we reduce the stigma, we talk about what can we do for self-care. So we look at that mental health umbrella from mental wellness to mental illness. And we don't have to talk about the mental illness that scares everybody. We can talk about the proactive mental wellness that people can buy into and say, what are the best measures for me to do it? So going into your thing, why don't we talk about this once a day? Hey, how are you feeling? If you did feel suicidal, would you tell me? Who do you feel you could tell? Do you have a friend that you think you could tell? If a friend told you they were suicidal, who would you call? What would you do? Giving people those tools where if these situations come up, we know what to do. When people say, well, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to even bring it into fruition. I said, look at our world. Look at our society. Our people are showing you they're hurting by the way they're hurting themselves. So we want to make sure that we do this, proactively. We want to make sure, even if it's not a mental health first aid, what are the other strategies? Who are the Lisa Montesummies we can bring in to be able to educate my team? Who are the Kinsley Gunners? Who are the Angel Brutuses? Who are the Aaron Gustons? Who are the Keno Miller? Who are the people that's inside of this society that we say, they do this for a living? We can come in, and because they come from working in areas in the pros and in Olympics and in the NCAA spaces, these elite sports, they can relate to what it's like to be if you want to get to that level and what's the best practices to get there, not only from a performance standpoint, but a mental performance. So again, it goes into early intervention, early prevention, just being able to have those conversations that at one time were unspeakable conversations.
And those conversations when you started your career were more unspeakable than now. There's been an evolution and a growth within the field that you've been a part of and witnessed to, been learning from and given value to. How would you describe the evolution of sports psychology, our field, our industry, as you've been in this work for, 15 years and more?
You know what? This is the thing. When I remember when I was hired full-time by the Milwaukee Bucks in 2014, people was like, what the heck are they doing? There was a few other teams who had a full-time psychologist, and one was the Dallas Mavericks. They had DK over there. And you know what was the funny thing? DK had a player by the name of Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd became the coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. He said, what I had in Dallas, I know how important this was. We need to have this here. And when I was there, it was in a consultant role. And he told me at this time, he said, we need you here full-time because you're either in or you're out. Because if you're really going to be here, I need you to understand the pulse of the team, what's going on a daily basis. So with that being stated, there were some things that happened in the league that was like these kind of what they call unicorn cases that hadn't happened before. But it just happened to happen to the Milwaukee Bucks where I was at. And it was like, what if they hadn't had a psychologist there? And so through the years, that's where you see the NBA mind health from the NBA, WNBA, where now every team wasn't a suggestion, is mandated. You see that in the NFL now. You see that in other sports, that we have somebody embedded in the team who's able to be a person who can talk to these players and not only talk to them, the leagues, the PA systems have outside entities that say, if you can't talk within the team, we're going to have these resources for you. So through the years, they've seen how this has been beneficial, how it's been helpful, what works and what doesn't work. So you see it grow, and preferably it'll continue to grow. We see it on the college scene. At one time, there was nothing in colleges. Then you would have one provider for the whole athletic system.
Right.
And you're just like, this is not feasible. This is not sustainable. And now you see staffs that have 6 and 7 people strong, and they thought at one time this was too much, but it was like, this is still not enough, but this is a lot better than what we had. And so when you start to see, oh, this is something that we need, and we talk about suicides, we see it so often. on the collegiate campuses. And we know this is the time of proliferation for a lot of the diagnoses that when the parents say, well, they didn't have this when they were at home. But we know that that 16 to 25 is a big time expansion when we see those diagnosable things that come out of the DSM-5 that would not create some of those things from a bipolar or heavy depression, even some of the psychosis, some of those things that could have suicidal options and tendencies. And if you have the appropriate help there to diagnose it, to see it, to be able to treat it, to be able to help, it's not going to work. And we know specifically within the sports program, a lot of those athletes aren't going over to the traditional collegiate campus, to the counseling department. So you need a counseling department embedded within athletics where there's a safety, a comfortability, and an understanding of exactly the need for these athletes with these specific needs. So when we see all of those things, there was a need, there was a devastating hurt, and then there was a response to it. The sad part is we always wait for something devastating to be able to grow, to be able to expand. So what we have to do is to look at to see the things that are not good and say, how can we be better, learn from these situations and continue to grow? So we've grown, but we still got more growing to do.
Yes. Thank you so much. I agree. Do you feel like the sort of athletic training room is going to be an equivalent to a space that you speak of as embedded for the clinical and performance care of the athletes, that it's going to be that normalized one day?
Oh, it should be, because if you remember, if you look at, like, we talked about the NBA, if you look at pictures from the 1970s, you have like 3 coaches and then like 12 players. Now, if you look at pictures, it's like it's more staff than players because they need a weight trainer, they need a dietitian, nutritionist, and they started to understand, hey, if we're going to really give these athletes everything they need to be in optimal position, we're going to have to grow this. And then what happens is just like this. Well, you get one athletic trainer, you say, well, we actually need 2. Well, we actually need 3. We need somebody at home on a roll. We need somebody who specializes in this. And that's what you say, I think really psychology came from, because the ATs were the de facto mental health people. And they said, what? We can work with this and we can help, but there's some things that goes a little bit beyond our pay grade that we need help in. And so just as the athletic trainers and the strength and conditioning coaches became embedded and normalized, I believe so will the performance and the psychologists, because they're going to show how they can be beneficial and helpful.
Yes. Thank you for that perspective. Staying with the collegiate landscape, we know that name, image, and likeness, NIL, has had a big impact on these young people making these big decisions. Like, what psychological pressures or opportunities are you noticing for student athletes navigating this new reality?
You know what? When I worked at the collegiate space, it was a Power 5 then, now they call it the Power 4. But in these Power 5 spaces, is so much on these athletes. And I would tell my athletes when they come in, I said, listen, there's going to be 3 things open to you, but you can only do 2 well. And it was like, what are these 3 things? I said, well, you can play your sport, you can do your grades, or you can live the traditional social college life. I said, of those 3 things, you can only do 2 well. What are you going to decide? Now, there's always an anomaly who can do all 3. But for the most part, people will say, I'm going to do grades, I'm going to do my sport. And when they do their grade in sport, there's a little social life that comes in there. But now we add NIL. Now you got 2 or 4 things. NIL is so profitable. Now you say, hey, I would be silly not to invest my time into this. So what takes away? Either your grades or either your actual performance. And there's some people, NIL outlived their performance on the field because they were spending and investing so much time. Now, I'm a fan of NIL. Not only am I a fan of NIL, I'm a fan of pay to play. I think forever, since 1985 in the Oklahoma lawsuit, when they started to get that television money contract, I said there was no longer an amateur sport. So when the coaches started getting big money, the players should have got that, but they kept them constrained under this student athlete. They're amateurs. They don't deserve to pay. But I said, when a university is profiting to that manner, these individuals not only need to get paid for their name, image, and likeness like they can in the NBA doing brands, but they also need to be paid by their team. Now, the problem with that comes this, Lisa, we just talked about, we want to grow these psych departments. Once we pay these athletes, guess what? It's less and less money for staff. So now here comes the real thing. where does this money go? How is it distributed? What's going to be cut? The landscape of the NCAA, as we know it with revenue generating sports, will not look the same in the next 10 years. It will be totally unrecognizable because of NIL. I think we're going to see more club sports. I think we're going to see other sports really become pure amateur. And those revenue generating sports are really going to be consequentially either minor pro teams or like a derivative of a pro team because of the amount of money that they bring in. And you see it now because NCAA football, they're really already detached from the NCAA, if we're being honest, but they're bringing in GMs. They're bringing in all of the things that look like what? A National Football League team. And what does that cost? That costs money. And now because you can have the boosters do all of those different things, it's a way that that money can be shared. It's a way it can be distributed, but it's so new and it's so unregulated. It's going to take a while for us to really understand it. But this is what NIL has done to the game. It's beautiful because the athletes are so worthy to be paid, so worthy to get what their name, image, and likeness can bring. The only thing is, it came out so new, people didn't understand how to integrate it into the system. So it became a wild, wild. They didn't call it the Wild Wild West. They call it the Wild Wild West, East, North, and South, because it was a wild system. It was like, what do? We didn't even know how to control it. You had agents who were taking advantage of some of the players. You had other schools who were trying to control their players through their NIL. And then you had other players who were taking off with the NIL and kind of losing track of the thing that got them the NIL in the first place. So NIL is a beautiful thing, but unregulated, it can be dangerous. So we have to figure out how do we get it so it can be confined within the schools, but that the athletes benefit the most from it.
Yes, the regulation piece is important because there's the psychological pressures that the team, the family, and the individual athlete each have to sort of cope with, manage. What would you say those psychological pressures are from an individual athlete perspective?
So when we're talking about a collegiate athlete, it's a lot different because we know just from neuropsychology that the brain does not develop until you get to 25, 28. So we're talking about what part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, this is our executive function. This is problem solving, delayed reaction. So now you're giving all of this responsibility, all of this money to a person who's still growing into their adult selves. So now let's say you take a person who is not from means and they get all of this money all of a sudden. Do they know how to distribute it? Do they understand the consequences from taxes? Do they understand how to invest it? Do they understand how not to give it away? Do they understand how not to get robbed and taken care of? Now, you're doing this while trying to learn an intricate play system, while learning at some academic institution and trying to be a college student. So you say, who's there to teach them to do all of that? Nobody. That's why we're seeing some of the things that's going on. So what we want to be able to do is say, how can we help these young people? Because we know we're putting too much pressure. And then we say, well, why do we see the behaviors? Because when you put them in this, now you see excessive drinking. Now you see hypersexual behavior. Now you see hyper-aggressive behavior, whether it's fighting or interpersonal violence with domestic violence, things of that nature. We see the manifestation by the errors and the things that they do. And these are things that's in the media and some of the things that's swept under the rug that we never see that they're protected from, but we know that.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I love that we are both duly trained. The CMPC and now psychology for you, clinical psychology, and clinical social work for me. So when you told me that you spoke at one of my professional organizations as the keynote, I was like, what? And that professional organization was the Alliance for Social Workers in Sport. And my boy Kweku was up in there dropping knowledge, I'm sure. But what an opportunity and what fun they all had listening to you, I'm so sure. I wasn't able to make it. I have deep regret for it. But what themes or moments from that experience stand out to you the most? Not just when you were given the keynote, but in your interactions with the other colleagues, professionals of that discipline?
You brought me back to my absolute beginnings. I started off as a school psychologist. So when I worked in the schools, I worked hand in hand with the social workers because we were a team. When we talk about multidisciplinary teams, that was the essence of where I learned. I understand the synergy where everybody had similar roles, but we all had our own lanes, but how they came together to do what? To help the student. So when I came to that conference, what I recognized was what a thing that the field is missing out on by not having the social workers fully integrated with the teams and the work that we do. I remember all of the specialness that the social workers bring, because they're so trained on such a diverse amount of different areas. Social workers, the thing with social workers are everywhere, which it is. Unfortunately, social workers get the bad saying, like, these are the people who will come into your house and take your kids.
Right.
One of my movies is Creed. And in the first scene, when he first come in, he was like, you know who you is? She said, do you know who I am? He said, you a social worker. Because I in that field, he was like, I'm not going no walls. It's like, I don't want it. And that's what I think that social workers got. But when you look at social workers in the hospital, you look at social workers in sports, you look at social work in education and business and all these places, the social workers were always those they were the extreme case managers, bringing everything in together. So at that conference, what it taught me was how intelligent like our social workers are. It's like I was just blown away from the research and study that they did. But this was specifically in the area of sports. So, you have an idea of the other stuff they do. But when I saw the research, the hardcore research, I was so impressed. I learned a lot. And this one, I was like, I know this is a group that we have to interact more. This is a synergy that needs to come. And when I did my keynote, one of the things I was able to do is to say, I was able to listen to a lot of the different workshops, seminars, and listen. And I was able to pull all of those things together. But we just talked about what's needed in the world of sports today. So we talked about ethics. We talked about NIL. We talked about gender parity within the sports. But we talked about something that we all had in common. And that was what we started this conversation with, a lack of self-care. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we take care of each other? What that balance, you sometimes hear work-life balance. How do you get work-life harmony? How do you get this synergy? How do you do it all? Because it almost seems impossible. But we talked about the little things that we have to do to be able to navigate that space. So in talking with a lot of the social workers there, I was able to meet so many different people, Dr. Leon Baines, Dr. Manny Bennett, Tiffany Taylor, and I could go on the names forever and whatnot. But like knowing Emmett Gill, knowing yourself before I came, meeting the Matt Moores of the world and the Natalie Grays, who I knew before we had talked. When I got to see all of these people, I said, this field is so strong, it's so powerful. I said, once we get this into sports, that's part of the problem with the NIL. How do we get the families together? Because once a person turns 18, they're emancipated. So from a HIPAA standpoint, how do we connect with the families? Well, we know with a simple release of information, bringing all the people in, again, in a proactive manner. What do we do before stuff gets hot? So while we're recruiting, hey, that social worker should be on a visit. When I was at the University of Wisconsin, I would go on recruit visits, or I would be there when the recruits came to the campus, because they wanted the parents to see, this is a psychologist that we have on board. This is a person who works with our team. This is a person who's going to be there for your son or for your daughter. And we bring the social workers in. Now we say, how do we get all of the people that are important in this person's sphere and their circle to make this work together for them? Because we always understand that troubles is going to come. How do we know troubles come? Look at the transfer portal. The transfer portal that people aren't happy. And it's not just about play. When we look, another thing we talked about the social worker conference was safe sports. How do we make sure that our athletes are safe, that our athletes are not being abused? And when we look at all of the things that go on from team hazing, that go on from some of the coaching hazing, or some of the coaching improprieties, when we look at the scandal at Ohio State with the wrestlers, when we look at Larry Nassar, when we look at Jerry Sandusky with Penn State and Michigan State, we see all of these things that can happen. So we talked about, how do we keep our eyes out there? And social workers and psychologists are acutely trained to be able to look for those things that can be pathological, or those things that don't seem to click and make sense, as mandatory reporters, and say, hey, let's gather the information that this is clean and good. Hey, now we know, nobody has to be worried. But if there's something that's not right, we don't have years and years and decades of abuse where we say, we should have known, we should have did something. We prevented that in the beginning. So that was the conglomerate of that conference. It was talking about, how can we be a benefit to the people who we serve?
No, I love it. I love it. The interconnection, the crossover, the collaboration. I think that it's worth mentioning, as a clinical social worker who was a social worker before I even knew what that was professionally, the S, lowercase s, lowercase w, that there's so many ways, even just in sport, that social workers can make impact. And it's my opportunity to build on what you said and just name them. You said case management, being able to, within a team, make sure that if for some reason, like let's say the Oakland Roots, the team I work for, if they need help with finding resources or culturally appropriate services, or where do I go to the market to find the food that I'm used to having? Where do I go to the doctor? How do I travel from here to there? That's case management, taking care of the human being, right? Taking care of the family is another way that social workers come up in there and maybe provide family communication sessions or family bonding or connection, or like, oh, my family is in the United States now that I am too, but they're across the country. How do I connect with them as a support system and building that up, right? Education on what mental health is, the difference between mental health and mental performance, the signs and symptoms of someone who might be declining in their mental health. And like that needs to be known to everyone working in the front office, providing this information for them. Then the clinical part. That's what you and I do. The licensed clinical social worker, you do it from the clinical psychologist, but the clinician does the therapy, can treat, prevent, diagnose all the mental health conditions and keep someone healthy within a condition if there's diagnoses, because that's important too, because the continuum across depression. Like you can be very high functioning depressed person, still have it, maybe on medication, maybe not, in regular therapy, and do your thing in life, do your thing on the field. Gosh, there's advocacy, there's policy development, there's curriculum development, there's crisis management, right? When it gets to that point, there's mitigation of risk, safety. There's so many things. And that's just in the sport ecosystem. Can you imagine all the work that we do out there? But I think that is an important thing to name, and that the Alliance for Social Workers of Sport was like the first professional organization I reached out to when I started working in sports, and I owe them a lot. The Dr. Stacy Kratz, the Dr. Stephanie Rosados, those folks, yeah. And so just grateful that there's this intersection, not just professionally, but like with someone I know so closely like yourself, is just really, really cool. It's just so cool. And you were talking about, I'm a social worker too. I've been one.
But I'm gonna tell you, like, when I look at like some of the different schools, when I see what they're doing at USC, when I see what they're doing at the University of Kentucky, or even at Tulane University, it's so many different schools that's popping up. And I said, just like with the psychologists, they got the CMPC, which I know you have. I know there's designations for the sports social workers to be able to make sure that they're qualified for that special niche. And I love that they're getting even more specialized in it, and all of the things that you name. That's what it's going to take, because we always say the athlete is their identity goes beyond their sport, but we only work in the sport. So if we really want to put some meat to that statement, what we have to do is say, we're going to love the whole person. And you know, that's a word that I know sound weird coming from clinical people, love, but I say, we can't say we're a family in this culture. We want to treat you like family. This is what we do. But then treat it as business as usual. I said, just be honest with who you're going to be. If you're going to be a business, it's going to be cutthroat. Say, hey, listen, we want the best of the best. We need people with no issues. If you got issues, we can't deal with you. I know what I'm dealing with. Hey, once a badger, always a badger. Hey, this is the Michigan way. This is what we do here. This is our culture. We're family. You see those words, then you need to show it. You need to act like that. And what you're saying is we have to bring people in who can bring in that whole eco-spirit of athlete.
Yes, the eco-spirit. I love it. I love it. If there was someone, and I know what happens often, comes to you, is an up-and-coming professional in this field, and there's two things you would give them for advice on how to go through their journey, decisions, and move through the process of either getting certified or licensed, what would you tell them?
There's two things, and it's funny that you said two at the beginning. The first thing I tell them to do is like the kind of stereotypical answer. I say, hey, join AASP, the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. I said, join CSPA, the Clinical Counseling Sports Psychology Association. Join APA, the American Psychological Association, Division 47 for the Sport and Exercise Performance. And I said, and if you really want to do global, join ISSP. That's the International Sports Psychology. And so when you start to deal with these organizations, you know what you do? You get to meet people. And that's where the more people I know, I met you at ASP, Lisa. So it's like, because I went to that conference in Texas, I got a chance to meet you, and then you build relationships. And now I know something. Guess what? You know it. It's just like being online. If I know something, my line brother, my line sister, they know it's that type of energy. And so when we start talking about, now you say, what's the latest work going out? Not only can I read it, but I can talk to the different people. I can talk to Jim Durley or Emily Clark or Mike Clark about sleep studies if I want to. I can go talk to Alex Cohen or Jamie Shelton on mindfulness if I want to do these different things. If I want to see what's going on in the NBA, WNBA, I can reach out to Ken Zagunter. If I want to know what's going on in any of these areas, I can talk to these people because I see them. I can join the boards. I get to learn policy and whatnot. How does this work? But then the second thing, what I tell people is this: I say, get you a circle of trusted people, because you know as well as I do in this field, because there's some glamorous spots that's there, people can lose their psychological social worker soul. That you want to do on these teams, and you can be pushed to do some things that goes outside the ethical boundary. So I said, if you want to be solid, you want to be true to not only to sport, but just to the profession in a sense, get some people around you that's a team that can help keep you in check. So whatever you do it with integrity, you do it with a high level of ethicalness and a high level of efficiency for those people who you serve. Because I tell people, if you can't walk a tightrope without a safety net, this is not the field for you. I'm working in the NBA. They told me they say, hey, listen, you're replaceable. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how brilliant you are. There's 15 other smart, brilliant people out there waiting for you, and you can be replaced overnight. And when you look at how the field is growing, you say, wow, there's so many different people. So when people get certain positions, they might hold on to them, and they might be tempted to do things that go outside the scope of what we do. So I tell people to be very careful, to have a circle so you can understand that my soul, my ethics is intact. Because if I have a question and I don't know if what I'm doing is above board, I have 5 people I can call. I'm going to call Lisa. I'm going to call Carolyn Davis. I'm going to call Chris Bader. I'm going to call, I can think of names. I'm going to call Chris Card, who's my mentor. I'm going to call people who I trust in this field, who's been around along. I'm going to call these people and say, what do you think about that? And they'd be like, you already know the answer, because they don't want to tell you, hey, what you're doing is different. Say, I don't know. You say, thank you. You set it up, but you need people who will be open and honest with you. But that goes to our first point. Being on those organizations, you learn all of the people. You learn who, mixes with you, who has similar mindset, similar interests and specialties. And those are the people you gravitate to. And out of that, you get your say to make sure you stay true. And I'm not telling people to run away from the field. I want you to do it effectively, but efficiently, but most important, ethically.
Yes, for sure. Those are such great points. And I will end today by sharing a conversation I had with Dr. Angel Brutus over brunch around the fact that when you work with, what was the word she used? Sort of like folks who have a lot of visibility, athletes who have a lot of visibility, it's a parallel process for those who are connected to them around the team or their success. And so there's an extra layer for us with our ethics, our laws, our confidentiality that we have to be very, very supported and cared for to make those decisions, because they're also managing decisions and we have to help them manage those decisions. So it's a parallel process in the support that is needed for both the athlete and the caregiver like ourselves. And that is so key that we should probably have 2 or 3 times the support that each athlete or team has to be able to have that extra layer of protection and risk management around these important decisions like you're talking about my mental health, about my NIL, about my family relationships, about all these decisions, my schoolwork, my intimate partner, there's so many decisions with that brain that's not developed that you have to lean on other people's brains that you trust. So the athlete needs that. We need that. The coach, for that matter, the families, the parents, right? That's a pillar of mental health, to have a strong support system. So I really appreciate you building that up and talking about it from a professional standpoint and also a personal standpoint. So I appreciate you, all that you are, your expertise, your humanity, your spirit, everything you add to this world on a professional and personal tip. And I appreciate sharing space and talking with you as always.
Same is here this way, Queen. I appreciate what you do. I love AthMindset. I don't know if you can see my book. I got it right here. That's one of my things on my shelf. And so it's not just talk.
You're awesome.
What we do, the things that we come. So I respect what you do, what you put out, because it not only helps me, but helps the people who we serve. And so it's always a pleasure to be in company with someone who's not just like on the cutting edge, but it's the person who's helping to create what happens next for the next generation. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much.
This podcast exists because of the team at CASCM. CASCM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At CASCM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at cascm.com.